So society has changed, attitudes have changed, but homophobia and transphobia are still major issues that we deal with, especially when you're a younger person. And today, with our three panelists, we'll discuss what has changed, what needs to be changed. But first, we're going to kick it off with a bit of technology in the room, right? So get your phones out, people. Let's get our phones out, and let's get our poll up. Now, this is from a study from 2018. What percentage of LGBTQ students in the UK hid or disguised that they are LGBTQ at university in the last year because they were afraid of discrimination? Um, 10%, 26%, 35%, 42%. Maybe I'll ask you, while people answer, I'll ask you, Susie, what do you think?
Higher numbers, definitely, in my opinion. Certainly from what we see in terms of the fear that young people have around rejection, around coming out, around both their sexuality and their gender identity.
Zoe, what about you?
Personally, as someone who's transgender, when I came out, I went to university very soon after and transitioned throughout my time there, specifically with the aim in mind that it was a more accepting environment than what I'd find in the general public. So I'd say in sort of 26 or 35% would be my guess.
Tim?
I would go to the top end because, as we know from the young people we work with at AKT, one of the big challenges being in a school or a higher education environment and being accepted is one of the hardest challenges for them.
And the answer is 42%, which, I have to be honest with you, I was a little surprised by that number. I would have expected something sort of like maybe around 33 or 35%. Very interesting number, and one I think that we need to address, obviously. So my first question for you is, in the last 5 to 10 years, I want to talk about change. I want to talk about good change and bad change, but what has changed the most in the LGBTQ community in the last, say, 5 to 10 years, especially for younger people?
I would say that visibility of transgender people sort of over the last 5 years has massively increased, and there has been much more visibility in terms also of personalities, so people such as obviously Caitlyn Jenner, Laverne Cox, etc., and also on the internet and things like YouTube, etc. There's been a much higher representation of younger people transitioning. At the same time as that, in the last 2 years, I would say that the representation in print media particularly has been incredibly hostile, and we've seen a lot of sort of real attacks against transgender women in particular, against the validity of transgender children and young people, and the sort of thing that makes a young person look at that and believe that they're not valid, that they don't have a right to be, and attacks parents for supporting transgender children as well, and sort of blaming them as being sort of very PC. And I think one of the quotes from somebody was granola eating PC parent who's forcing this on their child to be trendy. And that's the thing that parents who are supporting their kids are facing all the time, and that's the thing that the children are facing all the time, is that this constant lack of understanding and belief in their right to know who they are. So.
Interesting. Zoe?
I would say that young people are starting to find their voice more, especially through the rise of things like social media, and combined with that representation, we're able to see people and interact with each other, and communally we get a sense of solidarity together, and that's what makes us stronger, and it's sort of like a chain effect that it's getting better and better. However, that does also open up paths for more attacks and more hostile behaviour. So social media can be a double-edged sword, but overall it's definitely a positive that we are finding our voice.
Tim?
I think from my perspective, it follows on from what Zoe was saying. I'm seeing a new generation of activists, leaders, and it really fills my heart with a lot of joy, as you can hear it. Fills my heart with a lot of joy because I come from that generation of activists in the 80s, and to see young people collectivising themselves, forming conscious views about how the world should look for them, so important. And I'm really proud of that, and it's fantastic to be just on the edges of that as an older person.
Not that old, come on. So positive change, there's been some change, but obviously not enough. So what needs to be addressed? Is it on a government level? Is it an education level? Is it a corporate level? Because I do want to talk about the corporate aspect here. What needs to change to break that wall down?
My belief is that education is the key to this, that young people from a very young age, children should be able to see that the world is very diverse and that there isn't a single way of being that is right, and that everybody is very different and they need to see that represented. So if you are the only trans pupil in a class, for example, having materials there that represent transgender people is really important, because then they know that they're not alone. I think within schools, LGBT groups within schools, very clear representation from within schools in terms of like rainbow lanyards, visible support for trans and LGBT young people across the board. That just makes it the fact that it's just a part of life. And in terms of government, it's horrible to see what's happening in the States at the moment and see so many rights being wheeled back and so many people put in a position where they believed that life was changing for the better, representation of them as human beings was being validated, and then suddenly to see themselves again being ostracized and picked out as being less than others. I think schools, education, I think corporates have a responsibility to make sure that they are visibly supporting LGBT staff, and I think everybody needs to be thinking about how to make everybody comfortable and how to make everybody feel included. Not just LGBT people, but we should be looking across diversity in terms of race, disability. We should be looking at religion as well. Everybody's different. We need to acknowledge that.
But a framework has to be put into place in order to make that happen.
Yeah, and I think understanding it has to come from the top down as well, in terms of that the management and the people at the top with the corporate responsibility, in terms of corporates anyway, they should be looking at, okay, so how can I help somebody bring their best selves into work? And the way that you do that is to enable them to be comfortable in their own skin, to come into that workplace and know that if anything is said or done, that it will be dealt with and dealt with appropriately, and to not be afraid.
Zoe.
Yeah, I'll just add on from that. It's, in regards to education, I grew up on the tail end of Section 28, and even then there's practically no mention of anything LGBT within schools. And embarrassingly, I actually found out I was trans through Google, because I didn't know what the word transgender was. I knew what these feelings were, but until I found out what the word transgender was and what it meant to be that's when it all clicked for me. And part of me does feel quite angry that if I would have found out, even a mention when I was growing up, I could have found out so much sooner. And so, yeah, I would agree, definitely more needs to be done from the top down in getting that point across.
I think from my perspective, there's been a lot of legislative change, but legislation doesn't change hearts and minds. It doesn't change society. People change society. Communities change society. And for me, the big focus for AKT at the moment is connecting with communities that our young people come from and encouraging acceptance, encouraging support for young people who are being rejected and ejected and suffering abuse at home. So for us, big focus is social activism, connecting communities, making communities take responsibility and work with us to change lives. The other big focus for us at the moment is around families and recognising that if we're going to prevent lifetimes of homelessness, we absolutely need to support families to support their young people when they come out. So there's a whole big focus around that in our charity. And then finally with corporates, I'm really happy to be at Bloomberg, and I saw one of AKT's best mates, Joelle from Bloomberg, who connected us with yourselves years ago. And corporates can really prevent lifetimes of homelessness and really change attitudes. And what you did, here's a great example of what corporates can do, is you helped us set up the UK's first safe house for LGBT youth. It's a massive way forward in protecting young people from the streets and challenging rejection of LGBTQ youth. So it's working in partnership on innovative solutions, because the state doesn't tend to innovate unless they have about 25 years to do that innovation. We know the corporate sector works faster than that, and it's working with you. We were able to come up with those solutions. So I think it's working together, and of course the inevitable financing that work is going to make the difference.
Bloomberg Philanthropies is a supporter of AKT, and obviously you do fantastic work. Zoey, maybe you can tell us a little about your role as a youth ambassador. I love that term, by the way, youth ambassador. It sounds very glam to me, so maybe you can tell us about it.
Yeah, my work with AKT is coming to events such as this. It's pretty much acting as a representative for the charity itself and for young people. And specifically for me, I want to be able to act as an inspiration for young people who are in the same situation as me of homelessness, and to use the 3 words that I always used to hate, tell them it gets better. I wrote an essay on it recently, just analysing the whole situation, but I want to be able to show our young people, our young LGBT people, that it does get better and improve.
One of the things that we do is we hold weekend residentials for families and young people. And one of the most effective parts of those weekends is when we have young people who have been connected with mermaids, and they stand up and they talk about their journeys and they talk about who they are. And the most, I think the most pivotal thing for those parents sat there is what Jake and Hannah were saying earlier, that it can be okay. And they look at those young people, they look at how bright they are, they look at the fact that they're getting on in life, that they're doing well, and it's that hope. And so for us, what we want to look at is the things that makes a parent change their mind from ignoring and trying to stop a young person from expressing themselves. What's that light bulb moment that actually makes them support? And we want to do some work on that. We're looking at trying to get some research done about what are the effective triggers for parents to decide that actually this is something that they need to love and support their child to deal with, rather than just trying to make it go away.
What happens when the framework isn't there, and someone falls through the cracks? I mean, like from AKT's perspective, I mean, kids can end up living on the streets if they don't have the right support.
I mean, to give you a sense of the issue, a quarter of the 150,000 young people at risk of homelessness identify as LGBT. It's a massive overrepresentation. And in 77% of those cases, simply because their parents have rejected them from a home, or they've suffered abuse. So there's a prevention message in that. But I think from our perspective, once homeless, LGBT youth are far more at risk of, obviously, attack, abuse. There are issues around their mental health declining, and obviously transphobia, biphobia, homophobia are quite common for them when they're on the streets. And you were talking about framework, and the problem is roughly around 40% of housing and homelessness mainstream services don't reach out effectively to LGBT youth, don't identify LGBT young people. And if I can give you one example, we helped a young woman who was housed by an organisation, and they put her in a neighbourhood where they thought as a young single woman she'd be safe. Nobody ever asked her about her sexual identity. She was walking down the street with her girlfriend 2 weeks after moving in and got her legs broken, because nobody asked her she was a lesbian, and the area that they put her in London, was an area with high homophobic hate crime. So she was always going to be at risk, but nobody asked that simple question. And that's the thing. That's why we're calling for mandatory monitoring of gender and sexual identity by housing and homelessness and other services. Because if people are invisible, that's when it all unravels.
We've talked about role models. You know, when I was younger, there weren't a lot of role models out there for young gay people to feel, I want to feel good about myself. What needs to change on that level? How can we change that to develop the role models?
I actually think the young people are doing it themselves. When we speak to, when we have our residential weekends, local groups, the young people that are on our forums, they're our future, and they want to be visible and they want to be heard. So actually those young people are doing it themselves, but what we need to do is make sure that they do so in such a way that they're kept safe as well, and to not exploit them, and to use their voices in such a way that we are putting them in the face of danger, because it is still risky and there are still valid concerns about what will happen to a young person if they do put themselves in the spotlight. So it's all really about being measured, looking at that framework that's around them, making sure that they've got appropriate support within their home and their environment, but also enabling them to have their voice heard and enabling them to get their stories out there. So that the fact is that if you see something and that represents you, then suddenly, like you were saying, Zoe, from when you were younger, you didn't even know that that was a thing, as it were. I mean, when my daughter's 25, very nearly 26 now, and she told me when she was 4 that she was really a girl, and I had no idea what to do. And very embarrassingly, I used Ask Jeeves to put in. I know, it's very sad. My son wants to be a girl, because there was nothing. And there is more now, and we need more of those voices, and we need to elevate those young people. And as I say, I think a lot of that work is being done by themselves. They're doing it because they are refusing to be silent, and they are refusing to be overlooked. And I think that's something to celebrate hugely.
We've talked about social media. What needs to be controlled? I mean, obviously, what I'm hearing here is that there's a lot of empowerment that comes through social media, being able to get your own message out there, your own message. But obviously we read about bullying online and kids taking their lives at times because they are so bullied. How do we control that? Do we need technology companies to take a certain responsibility?
I'd argue it's definitely something that needs to be more than what is being done now, especially with the increase in such violent rhetoric. It's a very difficult line when silencing someone, in that they may come back stronger with a whole new voice. But in terms of what's being done now, especially young people on social media feel that companies such as Facebook and Twitter are doing very little, especially when they do silence people who are they're sort of sharing, or when people argue back, it's like sometimes they'll just get silenced by Twitter, and it seems a bit hypocritical at times with social media companies. And I think that's something that definitely needs to be looked into.
There's not enough in terms of checks and balances. We know that Twitter put in rules about conduct and discourse around trans identities. But a lot of people will report those tweets, or will report those messages, etc., and still nothing is done about it. And there's no recourse, there's no way to go back and argue about that. But I think the best tweet I ever got was from somebody who sent me a picture of Ursula from the Little Mermaid, and it said, "This is Susie Green's true form." And I replied and said, "But seriously, does my bum look big in this?" But it's pretty horrific for a young person. And we did, during one of our weekend residentials, we don't do them anymore actually because it's too triggering. We had a session with Stop Hate UK, and we asked the young people in the room who had suffered from a hate crime, and every single one of them put their hand up. And that was horrific to see. And unfortunately, that's still pretty much the case.
I think there's two things I want to say about digital and social media generally. I think tech companies need to work with the voluntary sector, need to work with communities to actually look at the impact of what is out there. If I think about the reason we went into providing a digital service to young people, besides being able to reach young people when they need us most, wherever they are, was the thing about so much poor information out there, especially for trans young people. You know, advice that's really dodgy, and obviously the risks of grooming and safeguarding, and that's a big issue online as well. So I think there needs to be more proper, proactive engagement between tech companies and people working with vulnerable young people. There needs to be more of that, and I know it's a consistent message. On the other side, what I'd like to say is digital is imperative in the fight against all sorts of oppression and discrimination, because it means you can reach out quickly to get support when you need it. It means you can find people like yourself who can offer support. And certainly what we've seen, you know, we've been able to reach young people at that very critical moment when they need help. But on that side, tech companies need to work with organisations and with communities and individuals to make sure that we're doing this in the right way. They could, you know, force for good, force for change.
Interesting. My last question for the three of you is, let's say if I'm a parent, I am a sibling, my child, my sister, my brother, maybe they are struggling. They are identifying with the LGBTQ community. They are struggling at school. They're struggling in life. What advice would you give that parent or that sibling, that brother, that friend, to help that person empower?
I suppose one of the key messages that we have is that you need to support and love that child, whether that's your sister, your brother, your son, whether that child is coming out and saying, I don't fit with the binary, I don't identify as male or female. It's really important to love them in that moment, support them in that moment, and let them know that it doesn't matter to you, that you absolutely love them unconditionally. Because without having an idea of what the final outcome be, there seems to be so much force and impetus put into what if it's a phase and what will happen in the long run. But what is really important is that doesn't matter, because what really matters is that your child is heard, that if it's your brother, your sister, or your sibling is coming out and saying that they're non-binary, that the value that you give to them is the fact that it doesn't matter to you, that you love them regardless because you love them, not what the eventual outcome might be, and that you aren't invested in who they are going to become. You're invested in who they are right now, and that you will continue to be, and you will continue to love them and support them and be there for them. Because anything other than that is, I think that's completely unacceptable. It should be unconditional love, and I find it really difficult when that's not given, because you just want happy kids. Surely that's the bottom line. And telling somebody that they're not valid is not going to make them happy. It's going to make them feel shame. It's going to damage their self-esteem. It's going to make them think that they're wrong. That's not the way to make your kid happy.
Zoey.
Yeah, I would definitely 100% stand behind unconditional love being an important thing, and hearing that from my father was such an important thing for me coming out. But also I would say to never ever try and suppress your child in saying to them that they would be unhappy being who they are, as we heard from the panel before, because it's to not live a life that isn't true to yourself. It's just not a life at all. So we know it's going to be difficult as young people. We know it's going to have a strain on our parents. But yeah, for that unconditional love and to be supported no matter what is just so critical.
Tim.
I suppose it's beyond acceptance. I don't need anybody's acceptance. All I need is their respect. So I think respect is so important in all of this. So show them your respect. And secondly, love, unconditional love. Growing up, I was rejected by my mum, and I didn't get love. And I think it's so critical to have that unconditional love in your life. Because the bottom line is, before I came out to you, I was the same person I was the next day and the day after that. There's no excuse. And then finally, it's that, and I'm going to say it's get better, just to annoy you, Zoe. But it is about, do you know what, catapult forward, and you will become a tremendous, incredible person like Zoe. So, you know, and make sure they meet people like that, make sure they get support like that, because it does, you know, it does get better, and there are people like you, and you will get support. You've just got to push your way through.
Well, I'm happy we finished this on a positive note. Thank you so much for your time today.